conspiracy, the Mrs. Puff theory. And also, guys, Happy New Year! It's 2023 now when you're watching this. And also, new studio. Promised it to you. I got it. It's still under kind of construction. Didn't plan out the dates well, but I love the lighting and the camera set. So, this is how I'm doing it from now on. So, guys did. And also make sure to subscribe. And this is by Alex Beale. Link the original video down below. Discord server down below. And 100 subscriber much down below. Make sure to subscribe. When you do that, make sure to hit the like and make sure to get the bell so you get notified every time I do a video like this. How do YouTubers do that? How did they just... Sometimes I'll do a good take and then I'll click somewhere and it'll just delete it all. You don't know how many times that happened to me already, but every time that happens to me, don't worry. Every time that happens to me, I watch a new video. So you don't know how many videos I've halfly reacted to and then clicked. And also, as you can see by how long this is going to be a part 2. So guys, let's just get right in.
This is not Mrs. Puff. You may think she's just SpongeBob's boating teacher, but you'd be very, very wrong. For years, she's been running from her dark and mysterious past, but it's finally caught up to her. And behind it all is a mastermind who's been secretly controlling her life and psychologically torturing her. If you guys thought my last 2 theories were mind-blowing, get ready for my biggest conspiracy yet. This is the Mrs. Puff theory. I gotta start off by saying, wow, the reaction to my last 2 SpongeBob theories has been insane.
How does she know? How does she know?
Squilliam, you lying, deceiving, who is that handsome young devil?
I'm glad you guys are
I'm here too, but I'm kind of late.
enjoying my ridiculously deep dives into the show. I mean, I have to watch so much SpongeBob and read so much of the Wikipedia to put these theories together, but it's worth it because the writers actually take the time to set these things up. Now, a lot of people have been asking, Alex, how do you come up with these crazy conspiracy theories? Well, I always start these theories by looking for the moments in the show that seem to be implying more than they're letting on. Like I've said before, SpongeBob is a weird show with lots of abstract humor, but I can usually understand the intent the writers had behind a weird joke. But then there's stuff like this.
I hope I still remember how to do this. Yeah.
And it's so confusing and weird that it feels like the writers are trying to imply something beyond just weirdness for the sake of comedy. And nowhere in the show is there more of these moments than with Mrs. Puff. And once I
That
start...
is true when you start to think about it. Like, nobody else has stolen a boat. Nobody else has... If you think about it, all of it, I can't just think out of my brain everything that she has done, but when you kind of think about it, it's kind of true.
Started looking into it, it led me down the deepest rabbit hole I've ever seen from this show. So, let's begin. Uh-oh, looks like I'm getting hacked by a hacker. I knew this would happen if I got too close to the truth. Well, it's a good thing this video is sponsored by
It's not sponsored. My video is not sponsored.
Now I can finally make my YouTube SpongeBob conspiracy theories without the fear of being hacked. Thanks, NordVPN. Now without further ado, let's begin the theory.
Mrs. Puff's like passed.
Mrs. Puff is a boating school teacher in Bikini Bottom. She's passed all of her students except for one, SpongeBob SquarePants. He's taken her driver's test hundreds of times and he always ends up failing it and causing destruction and chaos that usually ends up with Mrs. Puff going to jail, despite it not really being her fault. We also know that she was once married, but her husband was killed by fishermen.
That's my driving teacher, Mrs. Puff.
Mrs. Puff? Oh, she's married.
Oh no, Mr. Krabs, she's single.
Then what happened to Mr. Puff?
She doesn't like to talk about it.
Throughout the show, there are moments like this that seem to be hinting at her having a dark, mysterious past. And in Season 2, Episode 10, No Free Rides, we get the biggest clue about who Mrs. Puff really is. After SpongeBob fails the driving test yet again, Mrs. Puff has just had it with him and ends up just giving up and giving him his license even though he never really passed. She quickly realizes that this is a horrible idea and he'll probably end up destroying the entire town.
La 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 la
So much destruction. This reporter asks, why? Local consensus places the blame on this negligent, selfish driving instructor who...
Remember this clip, because it's going to be very important later on.
Okay.
And then she says this insanely revealing line.
What have I done? Everyone will know that
Oh
I
yeah,
let
I
him
remember
slide through
this while I
school.
was watching this episode as a kid. Well, littler.
I'll have to move to a new city, start a new boating school with a new name. No, not again.
Not again, Mrs. Puff. Not again. Not. We don't need anything else but the again part. The again part.
No, not again.
Yeah, like
Come
what?
on, it's like they're just begging someone to make a theory about this. So we now
Not
know
again.
Mrs. Puff was originally from a different town, she used to own a different boating school, and
Okay.
Mrs. Puff isn't even her real name. There's something in her past that she ran away from. Now, there's been some debate over whether she's actually referring to a new name for herself
Hey, green screen scared me.
or for her boating school, but I do think she's talking about her own name, because if she's trying to run away from something in her past, she wouldn't start a new boating school with her real name in the title.
Yeah.
Now, when she says again, I don't think she's just referring to starting a new life.
Everyone will know that I let him slide through school. Not again.
I think at her previous boating school, she had a terrible student just like Spongebob who she prematurely gave a license to, and it led to something so terrible happening that she had to run away and start a whole new life. In Season 3, Episode 5, Doing Time, we get a flashback to when she first opened up the school.
Where did I go wrong? With the opening of my new boating school, I pledge that as long as a student is willing to learn, I shall never give up.
Hi, I'm SpongeBob SquarePants.
With the opening of this new boating school, let's keep in mind that this is not her first boating school. Maybe the whole reason she's making this pledge now at her second school is because she gave up on a student at her previous school, and that led to her having to run away and start a new life. She's pledging to never make the same mistake again. Now let's skip ahead to one of the newer episodes.
My keyboard's really dusty. I'm sorry, my keyboard is really dusty.
12, Episode 21, Lighthouse Louie, where Mrs. Puff has SpongeBob organize all the stuff she keeps in the school's lighthouse. There's lots of interesting things hidden in the background, but the first thing that caught my eye was this file labeled Mrs. Puff.
Why? Okay. I know he's the one supposed to be doing the theory, but why would she have a file of herself?
It makes sense for a teacher to have files on all their students, but why would she have a file about herself?
Yeah.
But let's remember, she's not Mrs. Puff. That's a fake
Okay.
identity she created, and I'm willing to bet all of her fake identification documents are in this file. Back in No Free Rides, she just gives SpongeBob a license that she already had for him. So she clearly makes these licenses and would probably know how to make fake identifications. But that's not the
True.
only hint about Mrs. Puff's past in this lighthouse. There is something in here that directly confirms all of this. As SpongeBob swallows all of Mrs. Puff's junk, we see something very interesting for only a few frames. Deranged boat teacher makes getaway. 10 seasons later, and the creators are still hiding stuff about Mrs. Puff fleeing her old life. It might not look like it at first, but we actually get a ton of new information from this newspaper. This is from the New Kelp Post, which tells us Mrs. Puff originally lived in New Kelp City. Then there's a caption that reads, "Distracts authorities with balloon animals." And do you remember that clip from the beginning?
I hope I still remember how to do this. Yeah.
So whenever Mrs. Puff makes a getaway or commits a crime, she leaves behind a balloon animal to distract the police. I'm telling you guys, these writers don't just do stuff randomly, they have reasons for everything. And the most damning piece of evidence from this newspaper is actually the picture of Mrs. Puff. Kind of a strange photo, right?
Yeah.
We have seen this exact same photo
We
of
did?
her before. In the episode No Free Rides, when she imagines what would happen if SpongeBob got his license.
Local consensus places the blame on this negligent, selfish driving instructor.
This means that this isn't just her imagination of what might happen. This is also her remembering what happened when she lived in New Kelp City and prematurely gave one of her students a license. And I'm willing to bet that the fish reporting the news is the exact same one who reported about her in New Kelp City. Let me explain. We know from the episode Whatever Happened to SpongeBob that reporters from the Bikini Bottom News can also work for the New Kelp City News. But the real reason I think this is because of his hair. In the entire show, we have never seen this fish reporter with hair before. Why would the creators go out of their way to add that detail? Because Mrs. Puff isn't imagining him as he looks now. She's remembering him from years ago when he used to have hair, when he reported about her in New Kelp City. Mrs. Puff has been running from her past ever since, and is now forced to relive her experience with an unteachable student through Spongebob. But reliving this trauma has pushed her to the point of complete insanity. And trust me when I say that you have no idea how delusional she actually is.
Yo, are you
Oh, it's just a clip. So it's okay.
still trying to lose weight with exercise alone? Guys, it ain't gonna system for men. They
Another running gag throughout the series is Mrs. Puff's occasional nervous breakdowns or moments of insanity because of SpongeBob, and they get more severe as the show continues. At first, she did care for SpongeBob, but in the newer episodes, she literally tries to kill SpongeBob just to get him out of her life. Even
Wow.
SpongeBob just walking up to her gives her severe PTSD.
Hi, Mrs. Puff.
Hit the brakes! SpongeBob! Watch the tree! Laugh!
Wait, Mrs. Puff. We're not driving.
But these mostly seem like just one-off moments, and for the most part, Mrs. Puff is still a functioning member of society, right? I'm going to show you that she's actually much more insane and delusional than you may think, and some of the episodes she's in take place entirely in her own head. If we're talking about how insane Mrs. Puff is, there is no better place to start than the episode Doing Time. Once again, SpongeBob fails the boating test and causes destruction and chaos, which leads to Mrs. Puff going to jail. SpongeBob keeps breaking into jail to try and bust her out,
Okay.
but Mrs. Puff actually prefers being in jail over teaching him. We
Yeah.
actually get another interesting line about Mrs. Puff's past in this episode.
Okay, you can do this, Puff. You can get through this without losing your sanity. Oh, that's a road we don't want to go down again.
So we know that Mrs. Puff has lost her sanity in the past, probably from her previous terrible student. But it seems like she's recovered since then, except in
Yeah.
this episode she has a complete mental breakdown. SpongeBob keeps appearing in impossible places until she gets thrown into solitary confinement, where each wall of the room transforms into a giant SpongeBob face. And then the episode ends in a way that's so weird and confusing that it rivals the infamous gorilla episode ending. As Mrs. Puff freaks out, she's suddenly transported back into the beginning of the episode when SpongeBob was taking the test. Except this time, SpongeBob gets arrested instead of her.
Help! Help! No! This is not a good time. No!
I can't believe it. It was all a dream. I'm not going to jail.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time.
Oh, forget it.
So what's really going on in this episode? Was the ending all in her head? Is Mrs. Puff just caught in an endless loop? I think this entire episode is inside of Mrs. Puff's head, and she's actually on the outside the whole time, but she's been imagining herself inside of prison. I can explain. Listen closely to what the police officer tells Mrs. Puff.
I'm not going to jail.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time.
Why would you go to jail? You already did your time. And then revealing she's still in a prison uniform despite being on the outside. So this scene is obviously inside of her head,
Yeah.
which means everything we see is symbolic. And if we can understand the symbolism of it, we can understand what's really going on with Mrs. Puff. Notice how she's suddenly wearing a black and white striped prison uniform, even though the entire episode she's been wearing this orange jumpsuit. Why would the creators go to the extra effort to draw a whole new prison uniform for her? Well, we've seen her wear this black and white prison uniform before, the very first time she went to prison back in Season 1, Episode 7, Hall Monitor. So when the police officer says, "You've already done your time," he's referring to the first time she went to jail. But why is she still wearing that uniform outside of prison? Well, she may have gotten out of jail, but she was by no means free. Having to teach SpongeBob is a prison in itself, and she manifests that by believing she's in jail and wearing a prison uniform despite being on the outside. This entire episode, every time SpongeBob magically appears, is all inside of her head. She is completely delusional, and hints that she's experiencing these hallucinations don't stop there. Just 6 episodes later, she goes to a house party SpongeBob throws, and while everyone is talking and having a good time, in the background we see she's literally sitting by herself talking to an ice sculpture of SpongeBob. You can't tell me this isn't intentional. I mean, look at this. Now, back in the episode No Free Rides, there is a very strange picture.
I'm sorry I haven't spoken. I'm just so watching this because everything makes so much sense now. I'm never gonna view SpongeBob again. Though I'm not gonna view him in the episode anything. I'm not gonna view Mrs. Puff the same again. I just never am.
inside of Mrs. Puff's home. It's a picture of Mrs. Puff inside of a
Yes.
picture of Mrs. Puff inside of a picture of Mrs. Puff, creating an infinite loop. This is something that has confused SpongeBob fans for years. But like everything in the show, there is a reason for it being there. One of the SpongeBob storyboard artists actually called it the biggest mystery in the entire show. If you think about it, this is just like the end of Doing Time, where she's stuck in an infinite loop of SpongeBob failing the driving test. Because it's all symbolic of what her life is, just an endless cycle of SpongeBob taking the test and failing, and no matter what she does to try and escape, she always ends up back in the same place at the end of the episode. So this picture is another symbolic manifestation of what she's feeling. We even see another one of these pictures all the way in season 9, episode 5.
I've never noticed that one.
Bumper to bumper. This is something that the show is consistently alluding to. Mrs. Puff is an unreliable narrator, and anything we see with her could potentially all be inside of her own head. In fact, I believe I found another episode that takes place inside of her head. In season 9, episode 17, SpongeBob Long Pants, SpongeBob goes to a different boating instructor and actually gets his license. But as soon as he does, we briefly cut to Mrs. Puff waking up.
You pass.
I finally got my driver's license!
Lock your doors, bar your windows, it's the end of the world!
Now, this seems like it's probably just a throwaway gag where Mrs. Puff somehow senses that SpongeBob got his license and it causes her to wake up and freak out. You know, it's a good bit, it's funny, but I have a question. If the joke is that she's supposed to be waking up at the exact time SpongeBob gets his license, how come she wakes up at night when SpongeBob clearly gets his license during the day? Because this entire episode actually takes place inside of Mrs. Puff's head, and this is the only part of the episode in the real world.
I don't know what that was all about, but I'm glad it's over.
But let me pause for a second. I'm sure some of you are already wondering if this contradicts my previous SpongeBob video, The Television Theory. If you haven't watched that one, the gist of it is that the entire show is a documentary television show, and everything we see is actually being secretly filmed by scuba divers. And
Hey!
there's a ton of evidence to support it. I'm very proud of that video. You should definitely check it out. But if everything's supposed to be from a camera, then how are we seeing things from inside Mrs. Puff's head? In fact, how do we see dreams and flashbacks and thought bubbles? Well, I think the simple answer is that even though we view the show through an objective camera lens, the world itself still follows the rules of a cartoon.
You can never tell another living soul. Wait, hold on! What's that? My pen is out of ink. Plankton! You'll never get me formula, not even in a flashback.
In the world of SpongeBob, you can imagine something and other people can still see, record, or interact with it because that's just how cartoons work. Back to the theory, we know that her insanity has caused her to live a life of delusion, but if you remember back to the Lighthouse episode, she's also become an extreme hoarder, and looking at her collection of junk is like a look directly into her mind, so there's gotta be something we can learn about her from it. There's a picture of her boyfriend, Mr. Krabs, the hall monitor belt she gives her students, the mean drawings her students make her,
This is cool, like, flashbacks right now.
SpongeBob's diary,
Wait.
a book.
I haven't watched this before. I'm just guessing. Why does she have SpongeBob's diary? When? Why? How?
Loading safety helmet. Wait, SpongeBob's diary?
Yeah, what?
Why does she have SpongeBob's diary? The last time we saw that, it was safely put away in SpongeBob's library. What's it doing in her lighthouse? And why does she have Squidward's painting? And a table from the Krusty Krab? And SpongeBob's bike? And Squidward's teddy bear? And the hair curlers Mr. Krabs had? And that statue of Squidward? And that diamond ring? And that crown? And that bucket of radioactive waste? And that jellyfish sign? Oh my god. Mrs. Puff is a kleptomaniac. Mrs. Puff has been stealing from everyone in Bikini Bottom. I can even prove that her pet snail from season 3, episode 19 was stolen.
My snail is up a tree. I've had her since I was a little girl. No!
You've had that snail since you've been a little girl, huh? Then how come that is the exact same snail Squidward had 4 episodes ago in the Great Snail Race?
I wouldn't let Snelly here play with that mongrel mutt. She's a purebred. See, she even has her own papers.
He even has her paperwork. Mrs. Puff clearly stole the snail from Squidward. But why the hell would Mrs. Puff steal all this other junk? What possible use could she have for any of it? We could find the answer to that question by looking at this green hat and this purple jacket. These were gifts Mr. Krabs bought her on their first date, but she ended up feeling uncomfortable receiving them and gave them back to him.
I'm afraid I just don't feel comfortable accepting all these gifts.
Except apparently she's not too uncomfortable to steal them back afterwards. So clearly Mrs. Puff isn't stealing this stuff because she wants to use it. She just steals for the thrill of it. Maybe stealing things is her way of coping with the insanity of her everyday life. And remember, this isn't the first time she's gone insane.
You can get through this without losing your sanity. Oh, that's a road we don't want to go down again.
In fact, I have reason to believe that she started stealing things way back whenever she first went insane.
I hope I still remember how to do this.
I don't think she's just talking about remembering how to make balloon animals.
I always thought she was like, oh, I hope I remember how to make balloon animals.
She's probably also referring to remembering how to steal a boat. And if that's not enough for you, in a Spongebob comic book, she actually admits that she used to rob banks, and she wears the exact same ski mask.
Well, guys, I know I'm sad to stop in the middle, because that's it for today, and make sure to subscribe. Everything in the description, link in the description. I would recommend joining it if you want to talk to real fans, lifetime. And Happy New Year's, and make sure to get my new 100 subscriber merch, link in the description. Alex something, and link the original video down below. Everything will be down below. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications if you want to get notified every time I do a video, and make sure to like. Hope you have a good day, and bye.